So a window unit combined with a barely functioning central unit seems to be air conditioning at least the living room well enough to where I can kind of get some sleep. Um, got a little drunk last night. Couldn't really get comfortable, but I slept until I sobered up, which was about 1 o'clock in the morning. I got a few hours of sleep last night. But just took one of my anxiety pills. It's got me nice and drowsy. So probably going to be taking a nap here shortly if I can actually get myself to fall asleep. I got good news and bad news on the service advisor job. Good news is I went and met the owner and finally got to talk to him. Bad news is it's going to be over a month until July 1st before I will actually have a job with them. And but it seems like he likes me. Seems like I get along pretty well with the guys in there. So hurry up and wait, man. Big time. As far as the Walmart job goes, it's been a week since I smoked now. And I found my 7-day detox pills. I'm going to try to take those. And I'm thinking about trying to just delay that interview process to where I can get clean before they piss test me. And I'm not sure what the hours are going to be, whether I can work both jobs or not. If I could work both jobs, I might consider doing that, but won't really be possible without a roommate to look after things around here. But I've got a really good lead on a roommate. Been talking to this girl quite a bit, actually. She's looking to move out here from Minnesota. Minnesota, don't you know? Yeah. Oh, she's got the accent and everything. It's fucking cute as hell. And I've told her all about me. Told her all about the shit from the channel. Told her all about Kira and I. And she's not judgmental about it. She seems to be pretty understanding about it, actually. So, pretty sure I'm going to be not alone pretty soon. And not being alone would be really nice, because I'm really fucking lonely. Which is why I'm doing this live stream right now, because I really just want to take a nap, but I don't want to be alone. And I was hoping for somebody to come in here and chat with me. But I guess we'll see whether or not anybody shows up. And for now, I'm just going to put on some news and kick back. So that's all for the update on what's going on with me. And hopefully some people will come and join and we'll have something to talk about. Do I look tired? I feel tired. Went out and made my rounds today. chased my one job lead. About as productive as I could be. But that's all I have to do today because I'm not scheduled to work again until fucking Sunday. That's such bullshit. Like how the fuck they work somebody once a week like that? I just don't know. But anyways, plug my phone back in. Good news is the air conditioning is, you know, keeping up at least. I'm laid out in the living room here right by the fucking thing. Right there. Little window unit. It's keeping me halfway cool. But just halfway. Anyway, so whoever joins, thanks for joining me. We're just going to be listening to some news, I guess.
Thanks, Chuck. When we come back, the 2020 election and the comparison Joe Biden would probably prefer not to hear about.
It's supposed to be Morning Joe, not fucking Meet the Press. What the hell?
This is your wake-up call. Either 50%. In 2011, 90% of Republican primary voters disapproved of President Obama's job performance, much like the 88% of Democratic voters who dislike President Trump right now. So, at this moment, Biden actually looks more like Mitt Romney in 2012 than he does like Donald Trump in 2016. And that might be a similarity Biden wants to actually kind of avoid. Because Romney, being Mr. Electable on the right, wound up losing that general election. When we come back, Endgame and the major events that happened overseas that could tell us something about the politics in our own divided country. Soft supporters. Warren with I Have a Plan for That is starting to get traction. Bernie seems to be a candidate all of a sudden trying to figure out how to get traction again.
Well, this is the dilemma of 2020 because Bernie Sanders in 2016 was the flagship progressive candidate. If you liked Warren, if you liked other people, you really found your candidate in Bernie Sanders. Now you have Elizabeth Warren and other people talking about the same kind of legislation, same policies. I was talking to someone from the Warren campaign today. They wouldn't comment on polls, but they made a point to say, first of all, she's been to 18 states plus Puerto Rico. She's also someone who's held 81 town halls. That person was basically making the case, look, she's doing just as much as him. And I was thinking about how Senator Warren has been setting herself apart. Apart from being the first candidate to talk about impeaching the president, she also decided not to go on Fox News and hold that town hall. And I asked that campaign person, well, tell me a little bit more about that decision. They pointed me to the thread and said, look, she didn't mince any words with Fox News. She said they're hate-filled propaganda network. As a result, she's basically saying, this is the camp that I'm going to be in. Obviously, Bernie Sanders says, I want to go after those voters.
He was the first one to Fox Town Hall.
Yeah, and then of course you have Joe Biden, who is already trying to claim that he's the most progressive candidate. That's of course going to be pushed back on. But there's this idea that Bernie Sanders isn't the hot new kid anymore, and I know that that's interesting to say about Bernie Sanders. That really,
but you can't be an insurgent twice. It's tough to be an insurgent twice, and there is part of this where you look at Sanders and you think maybe it's nothing he can do about it. It's just that Hillary Clinton's not on the ballot again. I say this sometimes to Donald Trump supporters who think, Hillary Clinton's not going to be on the ballot again.
No.
And Sanders, without her as the galvanizing force, he didn't have as big of a following as perhaps we all thought.
Well, I think it was just inevitable as these other candidates, just like you say, get on the ground and they're making. It's in the early states, actually, where those polls are even more likely to show Warren and Harris. But I think the real worry I have is that we do polls week after week. We have 19 more weeks of this thing left, over a year and a half. And sometimes I dream of going back to the old system, where if you realize if we had parties choosing the candidates, it wouldn't be until the summer of 2020 that we would begin to have the conventions. And then Labor Day would start, and we'd be living a life. These polls.
Well, no, then we get to be the gatekeepers and say, This whisper campaign is happening. This whisper campaign. And this is what everybody hated, is that we journalists were gatekeepers.
I know you can't go backwards.
Yeah.
I mean, in 1912, when they introduced the first primary, and it was such a mess, because TR was calling Taft a fathead with the brain of a guinea pig. And they said, how can we argue like this? It's such a blush to all of Americans that we're seen arguing like this. We got to go back to the old system, which was rational, not a mob. But the good thing is a lot of ideas are coming out right now. However many candidates we have, we're coming up with good ideas, each one of them, and we can bounce. They have task forces, they're studying them, and at least it's a respite from the obsession with the presidency to talk about ideas.
Pat McCrory, I know the Trump campaign, Donald Trump's a terrible poker player. He's made it clear he fears Biden. Okay, he talks about him all the time. He never hides what he fears. Are you concerned that Biden's not getting sucked into the liberal debate or the progressive debate?
Yeah.
I think a bunch of you thought he would.
I think what Joe Biden is doing is what a lot of congressional Democrats did in red states during the last election. That is to say as little as possible about details of issues, which the other 30 candidates have already done.
Right.
And it's got them in trouble. And Harris, for example, got in trouble with insurance and health care and getting rid of private insurance. Biden is saying nothing at this point in time. He's talking macro. The question is, how much longer can he get away with that? A lot of congressional Democrats got away with that in the last election. It'll be interesting if Biden can stall for that period of time.
David, I keep pinning you back into Wisconsin, but I think about the Madison activists.
Yes.
And I think about them because that's, to me, can Joe Biden win them over? Right? If you win over the Madison activists on the, hey, my number one plank in a climate change proposal is beat Trump, and the Madison folks buy into that, that's real trouble if you're Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders.
I don't think he can win them over in the primary. I think if he wins the nomination, he can win them over, and particularly depending on who he picks as his vice president. But I think there's, I would, you know, there's a practicality to it where people are saying we just want to beat Trump. But I think there's plenty of alternatives besides Joe Biden for that among those activists.
All right, before we go, everything in the UK seems to preview American politics by 6 months, right? Brexit, Trump, etc. Doris, this is a Western democracy thing, a larger thing here.
Welcome, viewer. Feel free to say hello in the chats.
That Western democracies have not answered the needs of people. The prosperity of their countries has not been shared by a lot of people who feel out of the system. People in the country feel split up from people in the cities. Then they're
Just hanging out, listening
people.
to the news.
Immigrants become a scapegoat in all of these countries. It's a huge problem if a democracy doesn't share its prosperity and allow people to have mobility to rise to the level of their discipline and talent. And it's being felt in all these democracies right now. They haven't worked, and they have to work at that before we are going to see this everywhere.
Great way to end that. Thank you very much. That's all we have for today. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Memorial Day weekend. We'll be back next week, because if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
Host of Morning Joe First Look, Yasmin Vasugian, and historian, author of The Soul of America, and Rogers Professor of the Presidency at Vanderbilt University, John Meacham. He's an NBC News and MSNBC contributor, along with Willie and me. And Willie, since this is on tape, you know, since this is a taped special hour, I can't ask you how your barbecue was, but it must have been amazing.
It was.
It must have been amazing.
I used Richard Haas's grilling tips from his book.
Oh, you did?
Disarray. Second half
Great,
of the book.
I used it, yep. I
Beautiful
wore my
orange
apron.
marinade on the ribs. Yeah, it was great. How about you?
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. I wore my The World in Disarray apron,
Yep.
and I did not cook the piggy. We didn't eat the piggy or any of the live chickens.
Oh, good.
We actually made real food. So there you go, all healthy, all vegan.
Happy Memorial Day.
So we all hope you enjoyed Memorial Day as well, our viewers. And I want to start off with John Meacham with a historical look at this day. Remind us what this day is really about.
Well, it's really about the people who gave, in Lincoln's phrase, at Gettysburg, the last full measure of devotion. The people who, because of the vicissitudes and exigencies of history, found themselves on the front lines, fighting and either for ideas or defending ideas, and they gave their lives. Generally, younger people, which is an ancient reality. You read the Iliad, it's about the flower of youth being killed in the great dramas of war. But these are the people we were supposed to pause and ponder, who stood on the wall, who stood on the point, and made it possible for all of us to have these endless debates and these endless disputes that we have all the time, which is actually as depleting as it may feel, as dispiriting as the current political moment is. My God, think about the alternative. The people we commemorate are the people who made argument and democracy possible, and we owe them everything.
Mike Barnicle, before you take it to a next panelist, I just want to ask you what your reflections are during this time in terms of our attitudes in America, our knowledge and our understanding of people who serve in the military, who serve multiple tours of duty, who have taken part in wars on behalf of this country, and also are being deployed by this president by, let's say, maybe perhaps controversial means in terms of their deployments at the southern border for caravans that are coming in. It's a convoluting time, is it not?
Mika, because of my age, my background, my family history, there's a certain sadness with me about Memorial Day. Because you think of the word memorial, and part of that word incorporates memory. And with all the tools we have today, with Snapchat and Twitter and our smartphones, they're incredible instruments, but they've caused a loss of memory in America. Memory about who we are and who we've been. Memorial Day used to be May 30th. And Memorial Day used to be a time that was not just the start of summer, it was a time when nearly everyone remembered the fallen, because nearly everyone in this country had been touched by the fallen, on the street where they lived, in the parish where they belonged, in the clubs that they joined, in just the people they knew. They had either lost a member of their own
Welcome,
family,
viewer. Feel free to say hello in the chat.
someone on the block who had been lost. Multiple members of people on the block.
Just having another depressed day.
We now live in a 1% world where less than
Gave an update towards the bidding and everything.
people serve in our military.
How's it going, Mr.
Impact on
Matos?
them and their families is pretty much off to the sidelines. That's the sadness.
And Paul Rykov, I'd love for you to reflect on what Mike Barnicle just said, and
Oh, for fuck's
also,
sake.
given the work that you have done, how you're feeling
Yeah.
about the way the military perhaps is being used
It's so
by this
silly.
presidency. Does it really match their role in history?
I think sadly that's right, Mika, but I think as a starting point, Memorial Day.
I don't know. Maybe there was one last night after I already fell asleep.
We're so divided. Even if you just take 1 minute on the moment of silence that's observed at 3 o'clock local time everywhere in America, just take 1 minute and reflect on someone that you know that has died, or even if you don't know someone who's died, someone that has died on your behalf, to give you the opportunity to go have a barbecue or go to the beach, or even if you're at work, just take 1 minute to kind of reflect on what this means. I think it's actually an opportunity for us to reinvigorate what patriotism means. There's an inspiring generation that served overseas. We take inspiration from the ones that came before us, and I think that can be kind of a silver lining in this sadness, even looking at the fact that 3 of 9/11 veterans are now running for president. No matter what party you come from, I think that can be a sign of inspiration for us. We basically can go to war forever with a blank check in any country the president wants. So I think we have to, put it in timely context and know that right now we're on potentially a new war with Iran, and we've got to really ask hard questions, and that's a good way to honor the people who died.
Paul, you have lived the story of this 9/11 generation of veterans and those who died in Iraq and Afghanistan. You were in New York City on September 11th. You were at Ground Zero making rescues and helping people get out from under there.
I never claimed to be professional, that's for sure.
Went to Iraq, you fought, you came back, and then you spent...
My day's been pretty good. I gave an update on things at the beginning of the broadcast.
What are your thoughts about the brothers and sisters?
Some good news, bad news on the service advisor job front.
Lost in Iraq, the ones who were lost in
It's going to be till June 1st. July 1st.
And I think that's what kind of hits me the hardest, is they're not just people that I see
Before
on
they'll
TV,
hire
they're
me.
not just names I read in a paper. They're my
There's a
friends,
service
guys who
advisor.
I love.
The service advisor job can't open without a service advisor, without a service shop open.
Nicest guys I ever met.
They're not open to the public until July.
I want people to remember that Ed was a great American, that he was a great guy.
They got a bunch of stuff they got to clean up, a bunch of old cars they got to fix
To remember that he shouldn't be forgotten.
that they're trying to sell.
The other folks folks. And I also think that what Ed would want and what I would want is people to recommit to the folks that are still living. That includes people who are facing suicide. It includes the people that are facing burn pits and toxin exposures. I get into this a lot in my podcast where we talk about what these folks are facing and that they're underserved. So I think it's an opportunity, right? This whole conversation today is an opportunity to bring us together, go have the barbecue, enjoy the hell out of it, but also remember why we have it.
But what about talking about the issues that face veterans right now, once they've returned from service, the men and women that have put their lives on the line for this country, that are now returning and they have PTSD, they face high levels of suicide and cancer. I'm talking about that on this type of day.
Yeah.
Do you feel like this government is serving them to the full extent that they should be?
No, and I think you can't have this conversation without talking about the president. He's the commander-in-chief, he sets the tone, and I think what he's done, especially in the last 2 years, is politicize the military in a way we've never seen, whether it's the Khan family or the 4th of July parade or troops on the border. We are now in a political we're a political chewing, right? We're being pulled in a direction. The president frequently uses us as kind of a political shield, and that's bad. And he's also not listening to military council. We got to remember Mattis left. General Mattis left as Secretary of Defense, our senior military leader, because the president didn't listen to him. And now we've got folks running our wars in an acting Secretary of Defense, Shanahan, that hasn't been Senate approved. We've got somebody like Bolton who hasn't been Senate approved. And where is the voice of our troops? That's what I really want to know on all these issues. We need people who are publicly vetted, who are known by the public, and who are trusted, and that trust is really sacred, and it starts with the president.
Paul, you talk about president who never served his country. One thing that we have now in this last, as a result of the last election, was a red, white, and blue wave, meaning we have more people now coming back as veterans and now continuing to serve their country in Congress. Can you get into what they offer and maybe why their leadership is so critical now?
Yeah, I've called it the camouflage wave, and I think that they come from both parties. I think there are about 100 of them that came in this new wave in Congress. I think what they most of all represent is effectiveness and patriotism and hopefully a practical approach to government where they put their country ahead of their party. We've seen that, for example, on burn pits. We've had Republicans and Democrats like Brian Mast on the Republican side.
French Army before joining the SOE, a British spy division going behind enemy lines in occupied France. Hall's face covered wanted posters throughout Europe as she quickly established networks of spies to blow up bridges, track German troop movements, and trained and armed guerrilla fighters. Her intelligence is credited with helping the Americans trap German forces west of Paris and for helping lay the foundation for the Allied liberation of France. And joining us now is author Sonia Brunel. Her new book is A Woman of No Importance, the untold story of the American spy who helped win World War II, which takes a closer look at Hall's life.
Sonia, great to have you here. Congratulations on the book. When you sat down, we read through and we said, boy, this is screaming for a movie. And you said, oh, they've already optioned it. Of course they have, because the story is so remarkable. So tell us more about Virginia. She comes from a wealthy family in Baltimore. So how did she find herself in France before America had even entered the Second World War?
Well, she was always an adventurer. She was a tomboy when she was growing up. She went into high school once with a bracelet, an unusual bracelet, because it was made of live snakes. So she had a kind of unusual spirit, and she wasn't just going to sit around and, sort of marry the local boy. She wanted to be an ambassador. It didn't work out. She lost her leg in a hunting accident, but she was determined that that would not hold her back. It really, really sort of gave her the resolve, determination. So she volunteered to drive ambulances on the front line.
For the French Army.
For the French Army. No one else would take her. She was under German bombardment, bombings, machine gun fire. She kept going, and then finally, France capitulated. She was demobilized, and instead of going home and having a quiet life, she went and volunteered for the SOE and went behind enemy lines. This is 80 years ago. We still talk about women going on the front line now. She was behind enemy lines 80 years ago. It's quite exceptional.
So she's 35 years old, if I have my information correct, a desk clerk, effectively, and she's dropped into occupied France to follow German troop movements. How did she find herself in that position?
Well, Britain was absolutely short of anyone who was prepared to do this. I mean, I'm not sure I would volunteer, frankly. There was no backup. There was really very little training. She was told how to pick locks by a burglar and to replace dust on a surface if you remove something and how to creep noiselessly up to a house, but really they didn't know quite what they were doing. She was pioneering a whole new form of espionage, kind of mixed with being a special forces member. So she went into France. Britain was, in the end, very happy to have her. No one else would do it.
How did she get into France?
Look, she went undercover as an American journalist.
Wow.
So that's what she worked. She sent some articles to the New York Post, and that was her cover. But she would sometimes have 4 different disguises in a day. She would change her hair, put little rubber slivers in her cheeks to puff out her face, change her glasses or hat or something, and she would be all this time setting up networks.
Did she speak French?
She spoke French with a very heavy American accent, which meant that she couldn't ever be completely undercover, at least on her first mission. That changed later.
Yeah, she had 2 major things working against her. She was a woman, and of course she was disabled as well. These were 2 things during that time that would have relegated her to the background. How did she drive through that bias?
I think war, in some ways, in strange ways, is a liberation. It was just a case of desperation. No one else would do it. And initially they thought perhaps also her disability might help her cover. Who would expect a one-legged woman to be an absolutely a spy?
So, okay, so she wasn't just a curiosity. It's just not just an interesting story because she was a woman who had one, like she was an amazing spy who, you argue in the book, helped pave the way for the liberation of Paris.
Listen, at this point, the Allies really had no intelligence, no spy network in France. She rescued it, and I'm quoting an official document here, from extinction. She was described as almost embarrassingly successful. Other documents have said that at least half Allied operations at this point, spy operations at this point in France, were down to her. She was exceptional.
And Yasmin, take the next question, but doesn't it sound like a lot of no's that she got in her life just pushed her in even more extreme direction of her dreams?
Yeah, and that's what I keep thinking about, especially considering the fact of where she came from. What was it? What was it within her? And I'm wondering if this was part of the reason why you actually wrote the book in the first place. What was it within her that drove her through every no that she got along the way?
Well, I'm always interested in motivation. I mean, why would you put your life on the line? She was given a 50-50 chance of survival at best. I think partly it was down to that accident. We've talked about her being adventurous, but after the accident, when she lost her leg, she got gangrene. Her leg had to be cut off below the leg, below the knee. She was only 27. She was told that really her life was over. It was going to be kind of confined, narrow life from then on. She was no way going to accept that. She wanted to prove what she could still do, not what she could no longer do. And I think that was what drove her on every day, and that obviously that desire to see France free again and to defeat fascism.
What a great story. The book is A Woman of No Importance, the untold story of the American spy who helped win.
Do we have an application of morality in our activities? I don't. Could you talk on that subject? As far as I know, we don't engage in assassinations and kidnappings and things of that kind. As far as I know, we never have.
That was CIA Director Allen Dulles in 1965, denying that the CIA was in league with professional killers. But a new book documents how the United States employed a criminal syndicate in an effort to kill the president of Cuba. Joining us now, best-selling author and investigative journalist Thomas Mayer. His new book, Mafia Spies, the inside story of the CIA, gangsters, JFK, and Castro.
What a tangled web we weave in our government. A very tangled web with the mob. Talk about it. Well, it's the first time that America got involved with the assassination business. The CIA recruited 2 gangsters, Johnny Roselli, who was the mob's guy in Los Angeles, Hollywood, and in Las Vegas, and Sam Giancana, who was the top mobster. And so this book is kind of like combining 2 flavors. It's spy and the mafia at its height. And they were recruited, these 2 gangsters, to go kill Fidel Castro. Who recruited them? The CIA essentially. What year? Well, it was about 1960 that it happened. And Allen Dulles, who we just saw, who was flat out lying on nationwide television. This was a super secret mission. This is where when spying went from intelligence gathering to more covert, where we actually want to affect things by killing Castro. He was perceived as such a danger, not only in Cuba, but throughout Latin America, that the decision was made to kill him.
So talk about the Kennedy connection, because obviously a lot of connection between the Kennedys and Giancana.
Well, there sure is. Particularly with Giancana, one of the more intriguing things is that JFK was having an affair with a woman who was also having an affair with Giancana at the same time. So when we talk about Kolkrabat these days, the mob actually was manipulating this young woman to get the goods, if you will, on the Kennedys so that they wouldn't go after the mob. And, all these things are played out in FBI files that I review.
Mafia Spies, the title of this book could actually be The Never-Ending Story, because the linkage between Johnny Roselli, Sam Giancana, both of whom get whacked, the Kennedy assassination, the question still lingers. So my question to you, in the course of living this book, as you reported and wrote this book, do you think there is a truth out there that the American public does not know and might never know?
Well, Fidel Castro died at age 90, and you say, well, if there's all these CIA attempts to kill him, how did he avoid getting killed? And one of the things I found out, a lot of these JFK assassination papers came out in the last few years when President Trump allowed them. And when you look at those papers, you can see the way in which Castro put a spy system that was trained by the Russians, and he had a lot of informants in Florida. And so Castro often knew in advance where there was going to be attacks, on him. And that was one of the most intriguing things about it. And of course, right now, when we talk about Khashoggi, we talk about the Russians in Ukraine, the whole question about the open-endedness of assassination. What are the rules for the United States with assassination? And I think this book really underlines what happens when things get out of control. This was America's first foray into the assassination business, and I think it's something that really speaks to us right now.
From the papers that you've seen that were recently unearthed, did you draw any lines between the possibility of a Castro plot with the assassination of JFK or a mob plot because they had been betrayed because Bobby went after them?
Well, this is the only conspiracy that the CIA has actually said, yes, we actually did it. What we saw in that clip with Dulles in 2007, finally, the CIA said, Dulles actually authorized this. So Johnny Roselli, one of the characters, he coughs up that he was involved with the Castro conspiracy, and they find out his real identity. Roselli is not his real name. So he tells the feds, don't deport me back to Italy if I can tell you something about JFK's assassination. And it's right at that moment that he gets killed.
He says, I get some information on the Kennedy assassination, and he dies.
Right, exactly. And he kind of knew that he was going to get whacked. There's another guy who's like the last man standing. That's literally the name of the last chapter. A guy named Santo Trafficante. And he basically goes to dinner with Trafficante. Trafficante's wife, Roselli, his sister, and his nephew. And basically, he's pleading for his life. And, of course, 2 weeks later, Johnny's dead. He's in a barrel, and he comes bubbling up in the bay right near the Fontainebleau Hotel.
5G is on, and America must win. Our next guest argues that most companies don't even realize how revolutionary 5G will be. A perfect example of how new technology is coming too fast for conventional business to keep up. He puts forth this argument in his brand new book entitled Pivot to the Future, Discovering Value and Creating Growth in a Disrupted World. Omar Abosh joins us now. He is Group Chief Executive of Accenture's Communications, Media, and Technology Operating Group, and it is great to have you on. So just how revolutionary will it be? What is it that businesses don't understand?
Well, 5G, I think most people get that it's about faster networks, but actually it'll turn out to be a lot more than that. and envisaging all the different uses that will be put to change how we all work and live is sometimes a bit harder. So when you talk to executives today, they'll tell you that they can't quite imagine what the uses are and they need help figuring it out. But actually, when you think about applications from autonomous cars all the way through to the complete revolution in healthcare, we expect to see very major changes coming down the line.
How far off is it?
Obviously, it varies by country, but let's say in the 5 to 10 year time period, this will become prevalent all over the place.
One of the struggles already with 5G is how do we make sure that everyone takes advantage of 5G?
So the questions that I get from CEOs talking about this is actually how to create the right incentive regime for them to make the investments, because it actually costs a lot of money to deploy 5G networks. And in European countries, for example, you have subscale, smaller telcos with a lot of price regulations, so making the case for them is harder. In the US, actually, you've got 3 or 4 very large telcos who have got the financial wherewithal to do that. So actually, I expect to see deployments in the US proceeding ahead of many other countries.
So 5G, in its initial inception, that's going to change, banking, hospitalizations, whatever. 5-10 years away, you think?
Obviously, it'll vary depending on specific applications. The trick, though, for every business leader is to figure out how can I work out how to pivot the investments I have in today's business now and move using innovation, financial resource allocation, and people into a new set of scenarios that actually serve consumers' needs in the future.
So I get the top of the house is well aware of 5G. All sorts of companies are aware of the impact, the potential impact of 5G. What about educating the workforce how to deal with 5G, how to make it work?
So one of the major areas that we focus on in our book is that, while CEOs recognize that they need to move their business over time from what the core business was to a new business in the future, they have to bring their people with them. And the old logic that says, hey, I'm going to ditch this set of people who are no longer relevant and find a new set of people, we think no longer applies. It's not possible because new people don't exist. So you have to reskill your workforce. So there needs to be a new compact between employers and employees around how to make it easy for employees to learn the new skills and make them relevant in the future. And you see some great examples. For example, with Randall Stephenson at AT&T, where they're investing in network engineering skills and software engineering skills for the future with their people to enable them to be more relevant going forward in the future.
One of the central questions of our time, as you know very well, is around the question of what does technology mean for jobs that have been there for generations, and does do automation, robots, and all the rest of it mean that those people lose their jobs? You write in the book about Accenture, the company where you work, automating but also retaining those jobs. How do you do that, and how is that applied to other countries, other companies? Excuse me.
Thank you for the question. As you said, it's super personal to us. We have almost 500,000 people employed at Accenture. So what you're asking about is not theoretical at all. So we've been in the process of reskilling 300,000 people to new skills in digital cloud and security, which is new for in our space, where the agreement between us and our people is we make it extremely easy for them to learn. We create the right incentives for them to want to learn and to adopt that automation, that technology as assertively as anybody else, so that we make those capabilities more competitive. And then that frees up the capacity of those people to invest in new skills and grow them into new areas.
My name is Cole Plenty. My wife and I own 2 locations of a music dance school.
Tape MSNBC contributor Mike Barr, co-host of Morning Joe First Look. Yasmin Vasugian, and historian, author of The Soul of America, and Rogers Professor of the Presidency at Vanderbilt University, John Meacham. He's an NBC News and MSNBC contributor, along with Willie and me. And Willie, since this is on tape, since this is a tape special hour, I can't ask you how your barbecue was, but it must have been amazing.
It was.
It must have been amazing.
I used Richard Haas's grilling tips from his book.
Oh, you did?
Disarray. Second half
Great,
of the book.
I used it, yep.
Beautiful
I wore my
orange
apron.
marinade on the ribs. Yeah, it was great. How about you?
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. I wore my The World in Disarray apron,
Yep.
and I did not cook the piggy. We didn't eat the piggy or any of the live chickens. We actually made real food. So there you go, all healthy, all vegan.
Happy Memorial Day.
So we all hope you enjoyed Memorial Day as well, our viewers. And I want to start off with John Meacham with a historical look at this day. Remind us what this day is really about.
Well, it's really about our troops are either overseas or they're remembering their friends at the cemetery. So it's a time of really deep disconnect. And it's also a time of forever war. When there's no real political or social accountability, people keep going over and over again. And because of the authorization of the use of military force, we basically can go to war forever with a blank check in any country the president wants. So I think we have to put it in timely context and know that right now we're on potentially a new war with Iran.
Veterans of those wars. What are your thoughts about the brothers and sisters who didn't get a chance to fight for this most recent generation of the fallen?
Howdy, howdy.
TV, they're not just names I read in a paper. They're my friends. They're guys like I want that I served with. Infantry officer, basic orders. He was 28 years old. He was from Nebraska. One of the nicest guys I ever met. And he got killed by an RPG in Fallujah. I want people to remember that Ed was a great American, that he was a great guy, that he was a great son. That's what I wanted people to remember, that he shouldn't be forgotten. And
what's up, Scott?
And I also think that what Ed would want and what I would want is people to recommit to the folks that are still living. That includes people who are facing suicide. It includes the people that are facing burn pits and toxin exposures. I get into this a lot in my podcast where we talk about what these folks are facing and that they're underserved. So I think it's an opportunity, right? This whole conversation today is an opportunity to bring us together, go have barbecue, enjoy the hell out.
Well, I just have no energy and no motivation whatsoever.
Talk about the issues that face veterans right now once they've returned from service. The men and women that have put their lives on the line.
They've adjusted to his new medications.
That are now returning and they have PTSD. They face high levels of suicide and cancer. Talk about that on this type of day. Do you feel like this government is serving them to the full extent that they should be?
No. And I think you can't have this conversation without talking about the president. He's the commander-in-chief. He sets the tone. And I think what he's done, especially in the last 2 years, is politicize the military in a way we've never seen, whether it's the Khan family or the 4th of July parade or troops on the border. We are now in a political shooting. We're a political shooting. Right? We're being pulled in the direction the president frequently uses.
Taking wild rhubarb, huh?
And that's bad. And he's also not listening to military counsel. We got to remember Mattis left. General Mattis left as Secretary of Defense, our senior military leader, because the president didn't listen to him. And now we've got folks running our wars in acting Secretary of Defense Shanahan that hasn't been Senate approved. We've got somebody like Bolton who hasn't been Senate approved. And where is the voice of our troops? That's what I really want to know on all of these issues. We need people who are publicly vetted, who are known by the public, and who are trusted. And that trust is really sacred. It starts with the president.
Well, you talk about president who never served his country. One thing that we have now in this last, as a result of the last election, was a red, white, and blue wave, meaning we have more people now coming back as veterans and now continuing to serve their country in Congress. Can you get into what they offer and maybe why their leadership is so critical now?
Yeah, I've called it the camouflage wave. And I think that they come from both parties. I think there are about 100 of them that came in this new wave in Congress. I think what they most
Sorry, I didn't mean to flash the camera there.
and patriotism and hopefully practical approach to
Fucking landlord's being a dick about what he will and won't cut the fucking grass.
We've seen that, for example, on burn pits. We've had Republicans and Democrats like Brian Mast on the Republican side and Tulsi Gabbard come together because they want to take care of their fellow troops. I think that's an example, and maybe they can bring some light to all this heat in Washington and try to move us forward in the country, especially as other generations have. You think about the World War II generation. We had Bob Dole and Frank Lautenberg working together. I think they can do that same thing and hopefully bring us some leadership and inspiration.
So John Meacham, the sacrifice of military men and women is our face front and center a couple of times a year, Memorial Day, and also coming up soon here on June 6th, which will be the 75th anniversary of D-Day. You go walk through Washington, D.C., and you
Window unit.
50,000 names on the wall of the Vietnam Memorial. Those are moments where it rushes over you, the commitment that people
Which means
sacrifice that
kinda.
people have made for the country, but it feels like those are just words. How do we stay connected to our history?
It's
How
cold
do we
right
make
here,
sure
that's
that
about
our
it.
children and the next generations understand what's gone in, going all the way back to the revolution, to making this country and to keeping this country together?
Well, it goes back to something Mike was saying. It's about memory. The central command at the center of several of the great religious traditions. Christianity, do this in remembrance of me. Judaism, for the Song of Moses, remember the days of old, remember the years of many generations, ask thy fathers and they will tell thee, ask thy elders and they will show thee. There's this human instinct. I've been thinking about it last week because we lost Herman Wouk, the great novelist who wrote a lot, but The Winds of War and War and Remembrance. And I think I'm right that the last line of War and Remembrance, the second novel, thousands upon thousands of pages into this narrative, he wrote, the beginning of the end of war lies in remembrance. And I would suggest that the beginning of wisdom lies in remembrance. Remembering what we got right, remembering what we got wrong. If you walk on the Mall in Washington, you have monuments, both the World War II monument and, as you say, the Vietnam monument, two very different conflicts. And we shouldn't lose that. We should not overly sentimentalize the past. These were controversial wars in real time. We forget that we didn't declare war on Germany until Germany declared war on us. 5 days after Pearl Harbor, we were an isolationist country heading into the great cataclysm of the middle of the 20th century. Vietnam in some ways divides us still, the conflict there. And so understanding the panoply of history and remembering that the debates we have, the debates on the newspapers and now digitally and television and in Congress, remembering that there is a human cost to this. This is not paintball. There are people in Iraq and Afghanistan and all of the forward places who are actually giving their lives. And so our words have consequences.
I'd love to ask you more about that, John, and I also think Mike Barnicle would have a thing or two to say about this. Didn't it used to be that everybody had a stake in the war, everybody served, everybody, and now it appears that we do have people who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan who are now running for president and who are bringing their service to Washington, which we appreciate, but there seems to be such a disparity between those who choose
having
to join
some free
and serve,
cookies,
and those who often have the power and the ability to talk about it.
Well, that's the great story of Vietnam. World War II was far
not so
more
free
commonly
milk.
shared. It led to a peacetime or Cold War draft, where one of the reasons we're so divided right now, I'd argue, is that we don't know each other very well. We live in very secure silos. And so you have to look back and think, what was that? My old boss, Charlie Peters, has written a lot about this and thought about it. John Kennedy, when he was on PT 109, was on there with a plumber from the Bronx, a truck driver from Iowa, place and people that John Kennedy would never have encountered as the scion of Massachusetts immigrant family. And yet he understood, because he served with them, he understood that people were more complex, and he knew they knew each other. And again, I don't want to be nostalgic about it. Then you cut to Vietnam, and you do have people getting their way out. The great John Fogerty song, Fortunate Son. You know, there are people who could buy their way out. Fogerty wrote that song, as he put it, because he was watching Julie Nixon marry David Eisenhower, and he realized David Eisenhower wouldn't be affected by this. Fair or unfair, that was the ambient reality of the time. And my own family story, quickly, is fairly representative. Both my grandfather
brothers fought in the Second World War. My father fought in Vietnam, and I didn't serve. And that's a fairly common story.
And as we mark this very important day, Memorial Day, a major milestone has been reached at West Point. This year, the U.S. Military Academy graduated a record-setting number of African-American women cadets. NBC News correspondent Morgan Radford has the story.
It's a class photo gone viral. 34 black female cadets standing on the stairs of West Point Academy. Part of the most diverse class in the school's history. How does it feel to be part of that history?
It was just a very overwhelming feeling to see like all of our sisters, us just standing there in solidarity.
These women have formed a sisterhood that's also a support system. With more than 900 students in their graduating class, black women make up less than 4%.
It hasn't always been pretty. When you say it hasn't always been pretty, what do you mean? There are some moments here where you feel like, oh, am I worthy? You know, do I deserve to be here? I definitely struggled sometimes, because sometimes I'd be like the only woman of color, or even women in general in one of my classes. Every time I step into a new class, I count and I'm like, this is just me today.
Something their classmates also want to change.
We need different perspectives in our army.
That's what makes us better cadets and will make us better leaders.
Leaders for the next generation.
What do you hope other little girls who are watching you graduate take away from school? I hope those girls can see themselves in us. I want women to be soldiers. I want these little black girls to say, hey, I can do it too. I have the strength to defy the odds, which is what we did. We defied the odds.
Morgan Radford, NBC News, West Point, New York.
I have chills. Paul Rykoff, final thoughts from you this morning.
I think it's all about the future. I think the proper way to honor people who are before us is to commit to the future. And Clausewitz once said that politics, war is the extension of politics by other means. So get involved, whether it's voting, supporting a candidate. You want to honor these people. You got to be involved in our democracy. You got to make it better. Mark Twain said, "I love my country because my government doesn't deserve it." If you think this government doesn't deserve it right now, get involved.
At the very least, take that one moment today to make a prayer and say thank you. Memorial Day is often considered the unofficial start of summer. And this hour we have summer reading for you, including the untold story of the American spy who helped win World War II. How one woman talked her way behind enemy lines and changed the course of history. We will speak to that on there. Plus, Pivot to the Future, a new playbook helps us discover value in a disrupted world. We all know there's plenty of that right now. We'll talk about that. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back. During World War II, the Gestapo called her the most dangerous of the Allied spies. However, not many people know about Virginia Hall, one of the greatest spies in U.S. history. Born into a wealthy family in Baltimore, Hall was rejected from the Foreign Service because she was a woman and had a prosthetic leg. However, during World War II, she would work as an ambulance driver for the French Army before joining the SOE, a British spy division going behind enemy lines in occupied France. Hall's face covered wanted posters throughout.
All right, he actually cut it. There's this fucking little area right here behind my shed.
Tracked German troop movements and trained and armed guerrilla fighters. Her intelligence is credited with helping the Americans.
Just almost spit up.
Paris, and for helping lay the foundation.
But there's this little area behind my shed right here where he hasn't been cutting because there was one fucking little obstruction. Instead of moving it, he's been letting fucking trees grow there and shit. I don't have nothing equipment, no kind of equipment that could take that shit down. All I got is a little electric weed eater.
Sonia, great to have you here. Congratulations on the book. When you sat down, we read through it.
So I was trying to get him to go mow back there. He did, finally.
Of course they have, because the story is so remarkable. So tell us more about Virginia. She comes from a wealthy family in Baltimore. So how did she find herself in France before America had even entered the Second World War?
Well, she was always an adventurer. She was a tomboy when she was growing up. She went into high
high school once with a bracelet, an unusual bracelet because it was made of live snakes. So she had a kind of unusual spirit, and she wasn't just going to sit around and, you know, sort of marry the local boy. She wanted to be an ambassador. It didn't work out. She lost her leg in a hunting accident, but she was determined that that would not hold her back. It really, really sort of gave her resolve, determination. So she volunteered to drive ambulances on the front line.
French army.
For the French army. No one else would take her. She was under German bombardment, bombings, machine gun fire. She kept going, and then finally France capitulated. She was demobilized, and instead of going home and having a quiet life, she went and volunteered for the SOE and went behind enemy lines. It was 80 years ago. We still talk about women going on the front line now. She was behind enemy lines 80 years ago. It's quite exciting.
So she's 35 years old, if I have my information correct, a desk clerk, effectively. And she dropped into occupied France to follow German troop movements. How did she find herself in that position?
Well, Britain was absolutely short of anyone who was prepared to do this. I mean,
So anyway.
I'm not sure I would volunteer, frankly. There was no backup. There was really very little training. She was
Drinking from the carton. Yeah, I live alone. Why the fuck wouldn't I drink from the carton?
on the surface if you remove something and how to creep noiselessly up to a house. But really, they didn't know quite what
You want to give me a reason why I should dirty up a glass?
of espionage.
What's your logic behind that?
Mixed with being a special forces member. So she went into France. Britain was, in the end, very happy to have her. They let her do it.
How did she get into France?
Well, she went undercover as an American journalist. So that's what she worked. She sent some articles to the New York Post. That was her cover. But she would sometimes have 4 different disguises in a day. She would change her hair, put little rubber slivers in her cheeks to pop out her face, change her glasses or hat or something. And she would be all this time setting up networks.
She speak French.
She spoke French with a very heavy American accent.
Is that karma?
Couldn't ever be completely undercover, at least on her first mission. That changed later.
Yeah, she had 2 major things working against her. She was a woman, and of course she was disabled as well. These are 2 things during that time that would have relegated her.
Oh, hey, honey. How you doing?
How did she drive through that bias?
I think
Yes, I drink from the carton because nobody else fucking lives here.
It was just a case of desperation. No one else would do it.
And seriously, why would I dirty up a glass?
Help her cover. Who would expect
Creating unnecessary
a
work.
one-legged woman to be absolutely a spy?
So, okay, so she wasn't just a curiosity. It wasn't, it's just not an interesting
Well, yeah,
story.
at least right now.
She was an amazing spy who, you argue in the book, helped pave the way for the liberation of Paris.
Listen, at this point, the Allies really had no intelligence, no spy network in France.
If you'd like, we can buy separate half gallons. And then I can still drink from the carton without dirtying up the glass.
Embarrassingly successful. Other documents have said that these half Allied operations at this point, spy operations at this point in France, were down to her. She was exceptional.
And Yasmin, take the next question, but doesn't it sound like a lot of no's that she got in her life just pushed her in even more extreme direction of her dreams?
Yeah, and
I got the landlord to mow the fucking grass that he hasn't been mowing, so yay. I don't have to weed eat that shit.
What was it within her? And I'm wondering if this was part of the reason why you actually wrote the book in the first place. What was it within her that drove her through every no that she got along the way?
Well, I'm always interested in motivation. I mean, why would you put your life on the line? And she was given a 50-50 chance of survival at best. I think partly it was down to that accident. We've talked about her being adventurous, but after the accident, when she lost her leg, she got gangrene. Her leg had to be cut off below the leg, below the knee. She was only 27. She was told that really her life was over. It was going to be kind of confined, narrow life from then on. She was no way going to accept that. She wanted to prove what she could still do, not what she could no longer do. And I think that was what drove her on every day. And that, obviously that desire to see France free again and to defeat fascism.
What a great story. The book is A Woman of No Importance, the untold story of the American spy who helped win World War II. Sonia Purnell, thank you
So
very
yeah,
much.
this is what I do to try to sleep.
And Morning Joe will be back.
Hang out with my regular viewers and
Mr. Dulles, I know you've heard this many times, that there are people who say that we, with regard to the CIA, are waging a secret war
chat
with an invisible government.
listen to news and fuck off, basically.
Obviously engaged in many facets of what is generally called the Cold War, which the communist policies forced upon us. No use denying that. That's a fact of life.
Do we have an application of morality in our activities they don't?
Well, from one point of view, yes.
Could you talk on that subject?
Well, only that, as far as I know, we don't engage in assassinations and kidnappings and things of that kind.
This is my pile of stuff I told you about.
That was CIA Director Allen Dulles in 1965 denying that the CIA was in league with professional killers. But a new book documents how the United States employed a criminal syndicate in an effort to kill the president of Cuba. Joining us now, best-selling author and investigative journalist Thomas Mayer. His new book, Mafia Spies, the inside story of the CIA, gangsters, JFK, and Castro.
What a tangled web we our government, very tangled web with the mob.
No hobbies?
Well, it's the first time that America got involved with the assassination business.
I've got the fish tanks that have been kind of like a hobby that I can't really afford anymore because I can't do water changes, so my nitrates are making the fucking algae grow uncontrollably.
Combining two flavors, it's Spy and the Mafia at its height, and they were recruited, these two gangsters, to go kill.
I got a guitar
Castro. Who recruited him?
that I'm steadily forgetting how to play because I've just lost interest in everything.
About 1960.
And I've got video games, which I haven't been playing because I've lost interest in everything.
Was flat out lying on nationwide television. This was a super secret mission. This is where we went with spying, went from intelligence gathering to more covert, where we actually want to affect things by killing Castro. He was perceived as such a danger, not only in Cuba but throughout Latin America, that the decision was made to kill him.
So talk about the Kennedy connection, because obviously a lot of connection between the Kennedys.
Welcome viewer number 4. How about that? 4 people watching me hang around in my underwear.
Things is that JFK was having an affair with a woman who was also having an affair with Giancana at the same time. So when we talk about the Cobra mob these days, the mob actually was...
If the AC was really working, I would have pajama pants on. Instead, it's just like my back that's getting cold right now. Oh, welcome viewer number 5. Y'all feel free to say hello in the chats.
Mafia Spies, the title of this book could actually be Never-Ending Story, because the linkage between Johnny Roselli, Sam Giancana, both of whom get whacked, the Kennedy assassination, the question still lingers. So my question to you is, of course, of living this book, as your reporter that wrote this book, do you think...
Well, I got some people who just like to watch people sleeping,
The American public,
which I do a lot on this channel.
never know.
Well, you know, Fidel Castro
Lately anyways. Not what I used to do.
CIA attempts to kill him. How did he...
This used to be kind of a news broadcast.
One of the things I found out, you know, a lot of these JFK assassination papers came out in the last few years.
And then I've got friends who just hang out. Scott, for instance, he's going through kind of the same shit I am. So he just hangs out for the same reason I want to hang out. To have somebody to fucking hang out with.
And he had a lot of informants in Florida. And so Castro often knew in advance where there was going to be attacks, you know, on him. And that was one of the most intriguing things about it. And of course, right now, when we talk about Khashoggi, we talk about the Russians in Ukraine, the whole question about the open-endedness of assassination. You know, what are the rules for the United States with assassination? And I think this book really underlines what happens when things get out of control. This was America's first foray into the assassination business. And I think it's something that really speaks to us right now.
From the papers that you've seen that were recently unearthed, did you...
First and only foray into the assassination, despite what Trump thinks.
Assassination of JFK or a mob plot because they had been betrayed because Bobby went after them.
Well, you know, this is the only conspiracy that the CIA has actually said, yes, we actually did it. What we saw in that clip with Dulles, in 2007, finally, the CIA said Dulles actually authorized this. So Johnny Roselli, one of the characters, you know, he coughs up that he was involved with the Castro conspiracy, and they find out his real identity. Roselli is not his real name. So he tells the feds, don't deport me back to Italy if I can tell you something about JFK's assassination. And it's right at that moment that he gets killed.
So he says, I get some information on the Kennedy assassination, and he dies.
Right, exactly. And you kind of knew that he was going to get whacked. There's another guy who's like the last man standing. That's literally the name of the last chapter. A guy named Santo Trafficante. And he basically goes to dinner with Trafficante. It's Trafficante and Trafficante's wife, Roselli, his sister, and his nephew. And basically, he's pleading for his life. And, of course, 2 weeks later, Johnny's dead. He's in a barrel, and he comes bubbling up in the bay right near
Licorice
the
root.
Hotel, which is where the original conspiracy began.
Holy cow.
The book is Mafia Spies, the inside story of the CIA, gangsters, JFK, and Castro. Thomas Mayer, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
And Morning Joe is back in a moment. The Trump administration and the FCC recently announced several initiatives to spur 5G network growth in the U.S., with the president emphatically stating, quote, the race to 5G is on and America must win. Our next guest argues that most companies don't even realize how revolutionary 5G will be, a perfect example of how new technology is coming too fast for conventional business to keep up. He puts forth this argument in his brand new book entitled Pivot to the Future, Discovering Value and Creating Growth in a Disrupted World. Omar Abosh joins us now. He is Group Chief Executive of Accenture's Communications, Media, and Technology Operating Group, and it is great to have you on. So just how revolutionary will it be? What is it that businesses don't understand?
5G, I think most people get that it's about faster networks, but actually it'll turn out to be a lot more than that. And envisaging all the different uses that will be put to change how we all work and live is sometimes a bit harder. So when you talk to executives today, they'll tell you that they can't quite imagine what the uses are and they need help figuring it out. But actually, when you think about applications from autonomous cars all the way through to the complete revolution in healthcare, we expect to see very major changes coming down the line.
How far off is it?
Obviously, it varies by country, but let's say in the 5 to 10 year time period, this will become prevalent all over the place.
One of the struggles already with 5G is the inequality of 5G. In other words, it's in certain areas, but it doesn't reach rural areas, doesn't even reach some urban centers as well. It slows down kids in school doing research, hospitals out in rural areas like that. How do we make sure that everyone takes advantage of 5G?
So the questions that I get from CEOs talking about this is actually how to create the right incentive regime for them to make the investments, because it actually costs a lot of money to deploy 5G networks. And in European countries, for example, you have subscale, smaller telcos with a lot of price regulation, so making the case for them is harder. In the US, actually, you've got 3 or 4 very large telcos who have got the financial wherewithal to do that. So actually, I expect to see deployments in the US proceeding ahead of many other countries.
So 5G, its initial conception that it's going to change, banking, hospitalizations, whatever. 5-10 years away, you think?
Obviously, it will vary depending on specific applications. The trick, though, for every business leader is to figure out how can I work out how to pivot the investments I have in today's business now and move using innovation, financial resource allocation, and people into a new set of scenarios that actually serve consumer needs in the future.
So I get the top of the house is well aware of 5G. All sorts of companies are aware of the impact, the potential impact of 5G. What about educating the workforce how to deal with 5G, how to make it work?
So one of the major areas that we focus on in our book is that, while CEOs recognize that they need to move their business over time from what the core business was to a new business in the future, they have to bring their people with them. And the old logic that says, hey, I'm going to ditch this set of people who are no longer relevant and find a new set of people, we think no longer applies. It's not possible. Those new people don't exist. So you have to reskill your workforce. So there needs to be new compact between employers and employees around how to make it easy for employees to learn the new skills and make them relevant in the future. And you see some great examples.
as you know very well, is around the question of what does technology mean for jobs that have been there for generations, and does automation and robots and all the rest of it mean that those people lose their jobs? You write in the book about Accenture, the company where you work, automating but also retaining those jobs. How do you do that, and how is that applied to other companies? Excuse me.
Thank you for the question. As you said, it's super personal to us. We have almost 500,000 people employed at Accenture. So what you're asking about is not theoretical at all. So we've been in the process of reskilling 300,000 people to new skills in digital cloud and security, which is new for in our space.
Apparently I need to be drinking more water with this shit.
The agreement between us and our people is we make it extremely easy for them to learn. We create the right incentives for them to want to learn, and that makes them relevant. Now, on the flip side, if people are writing software somewhere to codify what our folks do, then we need to adopt that automation, that technology as effectively as anybody else, so that we make those capabilities more competitive.
All right, I'm laying back down. Fuck it.
Frees up the capacity of those people to invest in new skills and grow them into new areas. And so, in fact, we have removed tens of thousands of full-time equivalent roles in part of our core operations, but without having to displace people, we just get them reskilled and move them into new areas.
And you paid for that training? What happens internally to move them into new jobs?
Yes, absolutely.
What does the potential and the danger of AI, artificial intelligence, what role will 5G have in increasing either the potential for good or the dangers of artificial intelligence?
Well, as you know, every technology that's ever
I don't know.
I suspect you do. Every technology that's ever been invented since the start of human history has always got positive and potential side effects. So the ship and the shipwreck, the plane and the plane crash. Would you rather not have the new technology? Actually, most people today are totally relaxed about using AI.
So anyway.
In the anti-lock braking, it decides for them. In choosing music, it's choosing music services, it's choosing for them. So actually, AI is not so terrifying like that. And when we look at it in the round, we see an increase of about 10%.
It says to take 3 capsules with a bunch of water before bedtime. I need to drink more water, I guess. I'll drink some after a while.
And that's when the reskilling conversation becomes so important. And we believe that there needs to be a new compact between employees and employees to make that pivot in those skills from yesterday's skills to tomorrow's skills happen more easily.
Omar Abosh, thank you so much for being on the show with us. The book is Pivot to the Future. Thank you very much. Morning Joe is back in a moment. Taped hour of Morning Joe Memorial Day. With us this morning, we have MSNBC contributor Mike Barnicle, Republican strategist and MSNBC political analyst Susan Del Percio, U.S. Army veteran and host of Angry Americans Paul Rieckhoff, co-host of Morning Joe.
They're repeating the same shit.
Yasmin Vasugian, and historian, author of The Soul.
So time to move on to the next video, because I think we already repeated enough of that shit already.
Space crew can't use a freezer.
Freezer's full.
Pirated, copyrighted contact with ads.
Events like not just the sumo wrestling match or the dinner that we're talking about, but the opportunity.
They're gonna give me limited ads just for having the audio on here.
He now becomes the first world
They get
leader.
ads. With straight up copyrighted content.
Yeah, and let's not, forget the fact that that was a very big deal for them to make him the first world leader to go and meet the new
just doesn't
emperor.
seem
But
fair, I
there is
tell you.
also a bigger picture, Elena. This is not the first time the president has sided with North Korea or, in fact, other dictators or authoritarian leaders. What's the political calculus with that, or is there one? Is this more about the president backing and identifying people he simply sees as strong leaders?
Thinking might be here, and when she said that this is a top administrative goal for them, which is to open up and denuclearize North Korea, and that this is a way to try and keep those negotiations going. Now, that's a pretty tough cover for the president, who has continued over the last year to really not get much out of North Korea. So I think that clearly he's trying to keep those conversations going because he's made that such a centerpiece of his foreign policy. But as of yet, it's not really playing out in any way that's actually proving to be all that politically helpful for the president.
Meantime, Holly, the president still found time with everything else that was going on to tweet about impeachment, to tweet about the Democrats. How much are things back home weighing on him?
Well, listen, I think that the prospect of impeachment and the hanging shadow of congressional oversight on his administration is something that is always present for President Trump, right? It's like a little bit of a
Hey,
burr in your
Shadow.
shoe. It's always there, you're always feeling it, and the president is always irritated by it, as we can tell from what he says publicly and what he says on Twitter as well. Right, and that in the moments before he headed over to that state banquet this evening here in Tokyo, morning your time, the president was tweeting about the possibility of impeachment, tweeting his frustration with Democrats. He was also at the press conference asked about this, and the president repeated here on the world stage on foreign soil what we've heard him say so often at home: no collusion, no obstruction. For President Trump, it is yet another opportunity, another high-profile opportunity to air his grievances, if you will, to share his concerns that he has about congressional oversight. But listen, just because the president doesn't like it doesn't mean Democrats aren't going to do anything about it, right? When the members of Congress are on recess this week for the holiday weekend, but there are still wheels in motion related to a series of subpoenas that have been issued to the president, to his administration, to his top staffers, for example, that are yet to be resolved. Most recently, of course, is that subpoena for Deutsche Bank and Capital One, and there was that agreement between the president's lawyers and congressional Democrats to, in effect, hit pause on that for a little bit. But that pause button, Chris, is not indefinite, right? At some point, the appeals process runs out, and at some point, the rubber meets the road, and the Trump administration is going to have to either put up with those subpoenas or show up in court.
Yeah, and that's a critical question hanging out there. So, Elena, you've been on the trail with Democrats. You've written about Kirsten Gillibrand, Mayor Pete, Amy Klobuchar. So when you're out there, are these, if you want to call them political things, but impeachment, the question of whether or not people testify, is that what's on voters' minds? Is that what people are talking about? Because obviously the president believes that if the Democrats decide that they're going to go forward with impeachment, it's to his benefit. What are you hearing out there?
So I just spent the last 4 days in Iowa following Kirsten Gillibrand and Elizabeth Warren. And of the events that I saw, only one question came up about the Mueller report. And so I think that, or at least in somewhat related to impeachment questions. So I think that these kind of lay it off on House Democrats, let them make those decisions, move forward so that they can then pivot to the policy areas that they truly care about and believe that they're going to be able to distinguish themselves in this massive primary field.
Elena Schneider, thanks to you, and Hallie will be seeing you back there a little bit later. But as the clock is ticking, in this case, louder and louder for one of the president's closest confidants, Hope Hicks, the former White House communications director who left that post early last year, is being called back to Washington. The House Judiciary Committee wants to talk to her, first requesting a trove of documents by next Tuesday, June 4th, and also directing her to testify before the committee June 19th. Hicks, of course, meets the standard for the investigation for sure, because she's in more than 24 pages of the Mueller report. But will the president step in to try to stop her? NBC's Hans Nichols is at the White House. Also joining us, Charlie Savage, New York Times Washington correspondent, and former federal prosecutor Cynthia Oxney. So
I guess somebody didn't like my singing.
Hicks is one of the witnesses cited frequently in the Mueller report. Does the White House have any say over
Back down to one viewer.
Well, the White House hasn't said whether or not they have a say or whether or not they're going to weigh in. I suspect the answer is yes, Chris, and I suspect that the White House is going to do something similar with what they did with Don McGahn, and that is they initially said, don't hand over any of those documents. We think those documents belong to us. They hinted that they might invoke executive privilege, and then later on they asserted absolute immunity to try to prevent Don McGahn from appearing. And Don McGahn indicated that he didn't want much fun with this, and he would let the lawyers from the White House and House Judiciary fight this out, and he wouldn't insert himself. The White House has been pretty silent specifically on Hope Hicks, but in the past that's been the pattern where they say they're mulling it, it's up to the lawyers, and then they come out with some sort of assertion of some sort of privilege trying to prevent a former aide from testifying before the House.
Yeah, Charlie, do you think they're going to stay silent for long? What do you see as the White House options here?
Well, I think the pattern is for them to stay silent publicly up until the deadline, and then at the deadline say, look, we're directing this person not to talk, or we're telling them don't turn over the documents, or we're going to make another one of these very aggressive, contradicted by court precedent claims that former senior administration aides don't even have to show up before Congress. There's no reason for them to change that position. So far, it's working with Don McGahn. All of this is going to have to be resolved in court eventually. And the question really, in my mind, is when are Democrats going to start that ball rolling? Because they're not going to want the clock to be run out through prolonged litigation here.
Yeah, I guess you're right about that. And timing
everything, right? Because we're already in the 2020 cycle, Charlie. So, I mean, what is the calculus on either side? Do you think the White House thinks the longer this plays out, the longer Donald Trump can play the "they're going after me and my family" card, the better it is for them?
It certainly looks like that's their strategy. I haven't seen anyone say overtly that that's their strategy, but it seems to be that Trump likes the fight. He likes to portray Democrats as coming after him because that keeps his base riled up. And to the extent that they can drag this out in the courts, maybe they can prevent any new information or damaging televised hearings, taking stuff that's obscure in the pages of the Mueller report and making it visible to voters. Maybe he can keep that from coming out before the 2020 election. On the other hand, the first two courts that have looked at subpoena challenges by Trump's team, where they put forward this very aggressive theory that Congress lacks legislative authority to even ask questions from an oversight perspective, the first two judges to look at that have not been impressed, and they've moved very quickly to dispose of it and get it kicked up to the higher level. So if this is a run-out-the-clock strategy, it may not succeed.
We saw with Don McGahn, Cynthia, that he got a subpoena. He declined. He said no. He said he viewed the White House as a client. So is the Hope Hicks situation completely different?
I think it will turn out to be basically the same. She would rather not testify. Anybody would rather not testify and becoming a player in this circus. So she will take this bystander status and say, oh, the White House doesn't want me to, and you guys fight it out exactly like McGahn. And why shouldn't she? Because it's working, after all. There are 6 people who have refused to testify in front of the House, and the House hasn't done anything about it. Probably the way this will play out is eventually somebody will push on McGahn, and however that's resolved in the courts will sort of trickle down to all the other witnesses. But you have to start. The House is giving up its authority. The White House is stiff-arming them and getting away with it. And until the House asserts its authority in court and files more of these actions to enforce these subpoenas, no witness will testify because there's no reason to.
And do you see that's where this is going? Ultimately, it will be decided in the courts, or could you see some preemptive compromise?
I don't see a compromise at all. I think it will be decided in the courts, and it's a question of how long it takes to trickle up, at least to the circuit level. It's not clear to me that the Supreme Court will take it, but certainly it will go through the appeals court level, and the timing cannot finish until they actually do something in the House and stop talking about it. This whole debate about should we call it impeachment, should we call it not impeachment, should the table be round, should the table be oval, all of this is a typical Washington waste of time. What they need to do is enforce these subpoenas, otherwise they're giving away their equal status with the executive branch.
And Hans, what do we know about this agreement between the president's lawyers and Congress on some of his financial documents?
It's basically a deal to fast track and to not drag out the appeals process and to have some sort of decision come down. So the agreement that was reached just a couple days ago basically says, look, the Trump administration won't delay appeals, and what the Democrats won't actually seek to enforce the initial ruling right away. It's basically a plan to somehow get clarity, get certainty from the courts, but on an expedited matter. It does bear noting that the White House lost the first round of this in court, and so the White House is saying, okay, we're not going to drag this out. We're just going to get a decision. And Democrats accepted that. Chris?
You know, I want to go back just really quickly, Charlie, to what we just heard from one of our reporters. And we've heard this repeatedly from our correspondents, I'm sure the New York Times too, who are out on the campaign trail, and you watch these Q&As in places like Iowa, other early states. People are not asking about impeachment. People are not asking whether Don McGahn or Hope Hicks are going to testify, and whether or not, said candidate thinks that they should be compelled in some way, whether Congress needs to be more aggressive. I'm curious how you see this playing out in these early days of 2020 and maybe even in the upcoming debate.
Well, I think it's right that the ordinary voter outside of the Beltway does not pay attention to this sort of thing. It seems very insidery, very inside baseball, very procedural, very incremental. And to that plays to Trump's advantage, right? He can just sort of stonewall, and it's just the politicians are fighting again. What Democrats want, of course, is televised hearings that bring new information to light that can break through that and make the ordinary voter out in the hinterland or in my home state of Indiana, and so forth, pay attention and say, hey, something bad is happening, and they're sure they'll find that thing, if only they can get people to cough up documents and testify. And so right now, this seems very detached from ordinary life or from things that people care about. But if you can get to a point where information is coming to light on television, that may change.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember so vividly. I was, of course, very, very young, but during Watergate, John Dean's testimony is so vivid in my mind, and that view of him.
Of his day in Tokyo, and it was, as you say, action-packed for sure.
Yeah, so Karma's my new roommate.
Notable ceremony will become the first world leader to meet Japan's
She's the one I've been telling y'all about.
This is a trip, as White House officials have told me, that is all about relationships, right? Not just the relationship between the Trumps and the Japanese royals here, as we saw in that ceremony this morning, but critically, the relationship between President Trump and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. And while the two emphasized what was described as the unshakable bond between these two leaders and between these two countries, there was
one from Minnesota, yeah.
aggression when it came to those recent weapons tests by North Korea. President Trump downplaying them. Prime Minister Abe not doing that. Watch.
North Korea has tremendous economic potential, like perhaps few other developing nations anywhere in the world. And I think that he is looking to develop that way. He knows that with nuclear that's never going to happen. Only bad can happen. He understands that. He is a very smart man. He gets it well.
I'm joined now here in Tokyo by Andy Carney of the New York Times. Sumi Terry is joining us back home on the East Coast. And let me start with you, because when you listen to what the president had to say to Prime Minister Abe, and I know the folks in the United States are just waking up to this, but the idea that President Trump would say that North Korea's weapons testing is not a violation of UN Security Council resolutions, what kind of message do you think it sends, not just to Prime Minister Abe, but to the rest of the world?
Are you talking to me first? Yes. First of all, I think this is absolutely a point of digression here. Even though Prime Minister Abe wants to show that he's closely aligned with President Trump on all issues, when it comes to North Korea, they're not. Prime Minister Abe might be all smiles, but he knows short-range ballistic missiles are a direct threat to Japan. So the fact that President Trump said this is not a threat to Japan or South Korea, this is a problem. You're not aligned on this issue. On North Korea, I think Prime Minister Abe was aligned with President Trump in 2017 when we were pursuing maximum pressure. But right now, Prime Minister Abe is very weary of this engagement policy, this dialogue that leaves the North Korea nuclear weapons and missile program intact. And all these short-range ballistic missile tests are direct threat. And let me tell you, I think North Korea will escalate. It will be a controlled escalation. I think North Korea would not go to maybe an intercontinental ballistic missile test or nuclear test until the end of the year, because they gave that timeline. But believe me, they're going to continually ramp up this pressure and perhaps fly one over Japan, maybe a medium-range missile they're going to fly over Japan maybe by the summer. So I think this is a point of problem to the allies.
Given that, then, do you think President Trump is getting played by Kim Jong-un?
Right now, I would say so, because they're at an impasse. North Korea is not willing to get back to the negotiations. They're not even talking to each other. We're reaching out, but North Koreans are insisting that we need to get sanctions relief, which the United States is not ready to give. So again, what I foresee and what I predict is, unless we give North Koreans what they want, which is a big sanctions relief, they're going to dial up this pressure. And
the lead starts right now. President Trump on the world stage refuting his host, a U.S. ally, and his own top advisor, all to give North Korea's Kim Jong-un the benefit of the doubt. And it didn't end there. President Trump teaming up with the brutal dictator to slam former Vice President Joe Biden. How 2020 Democrats are responding. Plus, the death toll is growing. 11 people have now died on Everest this year, one seeming to foreshadow his own death in his last post to social media. Welcome to the special Memorial Day edition of The Lead. I'm Erica Hill, in Today for Jake. We begin with our world lead, what was supposed to be a show of unity between the U.S. and Japan. Instead, President Trump contradicting his host, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, not to mention his own national security advisor. The president saying he was not personally bothered by North Korea's recent missile test. Mr. Trump also siding with the brutal North Korean dictator over a fellow American, former Vice President Joe Biden.
CNN White House correspondent Caitlin Collins is traveling with the president in Tokyo. So, Caitlin, Prime Minister Abe said he and President Trump were completely on the same page on issues like trade and North Korea, but that's not what we saw.
Yeah, this was a heavily ceremonial trip that was meant to showcase and reinforce the bond between these two leaders. But Erica, when they got on stage and started taking questions from reporters, the cracks in that bond over key issues became very obvious.
President Trump's trip to Tokyo was brimming with pomp and pageantry.
Welcome back,
First
viewers.
Lady and I will never forget this gracious invitation.
Don't forget to click the like button.
Could hide the sharp divide between the two leaders when it came to North Korea.
You're not bothered at all by the small missiles.
No, I'm not. I am personally not.
Putting him squarely at odds with his national security advisor, John Bolton, and one of America's closest allies in Asia, who both agreed that North Korea's recent missile tests violate UN resolutions.
My people think it could have been a violation, as you know. I view it differently. I view it as a man. Perhaps he wants to get attention, and perhaps not. Who knows? It doesn't matter.
But it does matter to Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe.
This is violating the Security Council resolution.
The president is holding out hope Kim Jong-un will eventually denuclearize North Korea.
He is a very smart man. He gets it well.
And viewing it all through the lens of a real estate developer.
It's located between Russia and China on one side and South Korea on the other. And it's all waterfront property.
The president is also refusing to back off his endorsement of Kim Jong-un's criticism of his potential 2020 opponent, Joe Biden.
Kim Jong-un made a statement that Joe Biden is a low IQ individual. He probably is, based on his record. I think I agree with him on that.
Trump brushing off concerns he's siding with a brutal dictator over a former American vice president.
I can tell you that Joe Biden was a disaster. His administration with President Obama, they were basically a disaster when it came to so many things.
Now, the president flatly disagreed
You just can't
with his
name any
national
of them.
security advisor, John Bolton, during that press conference and his assessment of North Korea. But when the president was walking out and he was asked, do you still have confidence in John Bolton? He said yes.
The question of the message, of course, that this, as you have the president standing next to a leader who is supposed to be an ally, siding with North Korea's dictator. Betty, what is that message?
The message is that Donald Trump, once he likes you, the foreign dictator, and once you've flattered him, he will have your back. This is a guy who's always been very loyal to people who flatter him and will throw anyone under the bus the minute they don't. And I think the North Koreans, like the Saudis, like the Russians, they worked that out a while ago. This is how you get to Donald Trump. And you have Donald Trump saying these kind of, you saw just now in that tape, he says, I think he's a very, very smart man, at the same time as he accuses the former vice president of the United States of being low IQ. And I know we've played this game before, but can you imagine if Barack Obama in 2011 had said, oh, the Ayatollah Khamenei of Iran thinks Mitt Romney's low IQ and I'm totally with him. The Republicans wouldn't just be demanding impeachment, they'd be calling him a traitor and demanding execution.
You're right, we have played that game before, and yet here we are again. What's fascinating, though, is as we listen to each of these in their own words, and I want to play a short part of what President Trump said about Kim Jong-un. Take a listen to this.
I view it as a man. Perhaps he wants to get attention, and perhaps not. Who knows? It doesn't matter.
Mary Catherine, does it matter?
Yes, it matters a lot. And this, to me, this week is Trump playing into every argument that 2020 candidates will make against him on the Democratic side in the most perfect way. You've got immaturity, you've got volatility, and one that is particularly concerning to me and always has been is the possibility of foreign policy via tweet by somebody who is impulsive and who doesn't make great decisions and who often doesn't have a real tuned moral compass when it comes to dictators, right? So this is a real problem, and it's a problem that he and Bolton aren't on the same page and that he's talking about that in public overseas. And by the way, the Pelosi stuff is stateside political pugilism, and you can say it's out of bounds in certain ways. Overseas on Memorial Day weekend, it's just wrong, man.
It is. You can't ignore the timing on it, Mary Catherine, and you are absolutely right. You did bring up John Bolton, and we heard from Caitlin. It was Pamela Brown who asked, actually, at the press conference, if the president still had confidence in Bolton. He said yes. Ron, though, do you think this relationship is in danger here?
Well, look, I mean, they were never on the same page ideologically to start with. And so, you know, I'm not sure that this really changes that dynamic very much. I mean, what to me, and everyone kind of runs out their string with Trump. I mean, there's no one who works for him who, you know, doesn't share the last name, who has kind of like extended tenure. I mean, to me, the real point of this week was to underscore the dynamics of the relationship between Trump and the North Korean dictator. I mean, the president has gone so far out on a limb in insisting that his personal relationship is what can untie the Gordian knot that frustrated, you know, so many previous presidents from Clinton on, that he's in a position where he has to make this work. And I think what the North Koreans realize is how much leverage that gives them, because Trump is, because of his desire to show that he alone can solve this, is going to bend over backwards, as he demonstrated again this week, to forgive almost anything the North Koreans do. I think there's no question, you know, who is the pursuer and who is the pursued at this point in this negotiation.
Well, you know, Ron, to your point, too, that really puts in context what we heard from the president in terms of Joe Biden. I'll just play it again for folks who may have missed it.
Kim Jong-un made a statement that Joe Biden is a low IQ individual. He probably is, based on his record. I think I agree with him on that.
Sarah, that's a stunning statement for a number of reasons. But in some ways, it's not all that shocking that we're hearing it coming from the president.
I mean, I think it still is a stunning statement because this is Kim Jong-un we're talking about. I mean, we're not talking about, oh, the French president thinks that this of Joe Biden, and I agree with the French president. I mean, this is Kim Jong-un. But on the other hand, you know, it's not surprising in the sense that President Trump doesn't think about the things he's saying and sort of what does this mean for the presidency? What does this mean broadly for diplomacy? What message am I sending as the president of the United States, agreeing with the leader of North Korea over, you know, his view of a former vice president? He thinks, oh, great, Kim Jong-un is on my team. We both agree that, you know, Joe Biden is a low IQ individual. How great to have another person in my corner. And President Trump, and this was true when he was a candidate too, doesn't really care who you are or what you believe or what you think or what you've done in the past, as long as you are supporting him and you are vocal in that support. And that is one of these things that has not changed about him.
Also, I would say as an ally, it doesn't, as an ally of the Japanese, it doesn't help for them to sort of flaunt the fact that, oh, we're much further away from the North Koreans, so we don't have, I'm not super concerned about it. Well, of course Japan's concerned about it. They're right there, guys. I mean,
you know,
not helpful.
You know, in the flood of daily kind of outrages and controversies from Trump, there are very few that I could imagine making it all the way to 2020. But this, as Mary Catherine was saying before, this so encapsulates the arguments that you're going to hear from Democrats against them that I could imagine this being, especially Biden as the nominee, Biden using this to kind of really kind of encapsulate the case against Trump, that he is willing to, you know, that he is so focused on his own interest above the national interest, that he's willing to give credibility to a brutal, murdering foreign dictator in order to score a temporary political point against an opponent at home. I think this is something that's actually going to last, and we will hear about it in the general election of 2020.
Just on a substantive point, can we dwell for a moment on the idea that Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump are the people who are going to decide who has and who doesn't have high IQ?
Yeah.
I'm not going to touch that one, but I do want to bring it. Mary Catherine, in all seriousness, I do want to go back to one point, which is just piggybacking off of what Ron was just saying.
What's that?
This up in the
You got some
beginning
good
at the top
news?
of the hour here, in that, look, we're used to President Trump ignoring the norms, right? Doing things his own way. That is not surprising anymore. But there is still something to be said for a sitting president who takes the campaign overseas. Typically what we've seen, if a president is going to run for re-election, the campaign stays at home when he's traveling abroad for the country.
Right, and it should, and it's not a norm or a line I think he's going to start observing, although he should. I mean, if you're not observing it on Memorial Day weekend, when you're having a press conference with an ally overseas and talking about Kim Jong-un, I'm not sure when you're going to observe that. And I do think, look, that is one of the things, like I said, fighting at home is something that we do, and that many have died for the great right for us to run our mouths at each other and insult each other on our homeland. But generally, when you step foot overseas, you're supposed to keep it within the family. And he's not willing to do that. And it is something that I think when it comes to more moderate voters, certainly those suburban and ex-urban women voters that he tends to lose, that's not something that will play great with them. And I agree with Ron that a lot of these things don't have staying power. but this is perhaps one that goes a little further and may, but who knows these days.
Yeah.
But it's been several months since he said in West Virginia in a rally, I think it was September, that we wrote each other letters and we fell in love. That in itself should have been the moment everyone went, what? A US president, a Republican president saying he's in love with the dictator in North Korea? And the crowd just cheered and Republican members of Congress said nothing.
Yeah, and you can, and you can very easily imagine how this could be taken from how Democrats can come on from the other side of this. Again, basically making the argument that Trump has climbed so far out on a limb that he's basically surrendered too much or all of America's leverage over North Korea, because they realize he is so reluctant to have to in any way allow for the possibility that all of this was for naught. And that gives them a lot of leverage and puts them in a position of excusing a lot of their behavior that another president simply would not.
Speaking of Democrats, President Trump now saying he would be willing to work with House Democrats even while they're investigating him. So the big question, of course, what changed? More of our live coverage is next.
We will work with them. We have a USMCA, we have a deal with Canada and Mexico that everybody wants. I would imagine that Nancy Pelosi will approve that. I would think it would be very hard not to, but we'll see. But certainly, as things get approved, I would love to sign them.
Why don't you pull the CTF
President
from fucking
Trump
Ukraine,
reversing
too?
course now, as you just heard. He says he's willing to work with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi despite ongoing Democratic investigations. The shift comes on the heels of some stinging personal attacks last week, lobbed by both the president and the speaker. CNN's Phil Mattingly is live. So, Phil, the president said Democrats need to focus on areas of cooperation like lowering drug prices and trade. Is there any traction there?
Yeah, Erica, one of the most striking things about the sudden legislative freeze declaration last week is what was actually happening behind the scenes. Just over the course of the couple days prior, there had been ongoing bipartisan discussions with the White House that had broken some new ground on a budget agreement. There had been behind-the-scenes discussions between Speaker Pelosi's staff and White House staff on prescription drugs, trying to coalesce around a proposal there on the USMCA, the so-called #1 legislative priority of the Trump administration. Speaker Pelosi had just told the trade representative that she was going to designate working groups to work with the administration on their outstanding issues. So there actually had been work going on and some progress made on a lot of those issues before the president called for a freeze. I think the complicating factor here is the difficulty with both Democrats and Republicans on Capitol Hill knowing exactly where the president is on these issues. These issues are all complicated, these issues are all difficult, and all of these issues are going to need not just White House buy-in on the whole, but the president himself to be involved, to be present, and to try and figure out a path forward for them actually to reach an agreement. USMCA, I think, is the one that they expect something to happen on if something occurs, but a reminder that through all the kind of back and forth of last week, Speaker Pelosi decides whether or not the trade agreement ever comes to the House floor, and therefore the relationship is necessary no matter how fractured it is, and perhaps that, more than anything else, is why you saw the president at least kind of partially walk back what he had declared just a few days prior.
Maybe it's extending a tiny little olive branch, perhaps. Phil, good to see you. Thank you. Ron, especially as Phil laid it out there are still a number of questions, but how, if at all, does this rhetoric that we're hearing from the president today, this offer, saying he's willing to work with Democrats, how do you think that changes the strategy for Democrats?
I think it changes very little. I mean, I think first of all, the first step of all of this is that Mitch McConnell is refusing to consider any of the legislation that House Democrats are passing, right? I mean, they identified their, top 10 issues, and they've been moving through them. I think they've passed 5 of them now on the floor. There've been a total of 2 negative votes among Democrats on things like universal background checks, climate change, political reform, equal pay, the Equality Act on same-sex couples at work and in housing and so forth. And McConnell is refusing to consider any of them. So there's very little that has prospects of getting to the president in the first place. And I wonder. I know Phil, is obviously more plugged in than any of us on the day-to-day. But whether Democrats who see the primacy of winning back the 3 blue wall states in the Rust Belt that tipped to Trump in 2016, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, are going to give him a victory on the renegotiated NAFTA without exacting some of their own priorities in return, since that is the one thing he really needs to have from Congress in addition to a budget deal. That seems to me unlikely that they will give that up without getting something back. And right now, both the Senate Republicans and the administration have shown very little interest in advancing any of the priorities the Democrats are passing.
There's also the issue, as Phil laid out, of the president himself. We know he is mercurial, and that he can change focus, change tune very quickly, as we heard in just the last few days. In fact, just to remind folks, This is what he had to say just a couple of days ago about Nancy Pelosi.
She's a mess. Look, let's face it, she doesn't understand it. And they sort of feel she's disintegrating. Crazy Nancy. I tell you what, I've been watching her, and I have been watching her for a long period of time. She's not the same person. She's lost it. You think Nancy's the same as she was? She's not. Maybe we can all say that.
And listen, as we pointed out too, Nancy Pelosi did hit back a little bit. She was questioning the president's fitness, questioning whether folks around him were paying enough attention, Sarah. But as we look at this back and forth, there is the very real question of whether the commitment lasts, as Phil pointed out, and where they take this. So, Sarah, how do you think that is being weighed today?
Well, I mean, I don't think it was anyone's finest moment last week when the president was calling Nancy Pelosi crazy and Nancy Pelosi was saying the president and his family need to have some kind of intervention. So I do think that both sides realize they need to move beyond that point because it doesn't look good for anyone, frankly, if they just get nothing done, if they're stuck in a stalemate. I mean, Democrats are also trying to get the president out of the White House. They want to elect their own candidate. And if they essentially get nothing done, if they don't have anything they can even champion as their priority, they have a problem, too, as to what they stand for going into 2020, aside from just defeating President Trump. That said, the president stands up, well, you know, no one's doing what I want, the investigations are continuing, so I'm not going to play nicely with anyone. That is not a re-election message. You can't just say, I'm taking my toys and going home when you're the president of the United States. That's not how it works. You still need to run the country, even if there is another party that controls the House, and even if that party is investigating you, and that's been true for every other president who's been under investigation.
In terms of those investigations, Mary Catherine, the Trump team suffered some significant legal losses in terms of these financial documents. And there's a good chance, let's be honest, we're going to see some of that. At this point, how much does the American voter care?
Well, I mean, so part of the issue is that this was to some extent litigated during the 2016 election. And he was elected without giving his tax returns, which I have always said he should give. But he did not, and voters weighed that. So it is part of it. They are not as interested as many in media thought they were. They may be more interested now, but I'm not sure. Like the game has changed when it comes to what voters consider about this particular person.
It's a fair point.
I think Mary Catherine is right about how you weigh things up, and we don't know what they're interested in. Although we know more now than we knew then about, you know, his billions of losses, the accusations of, you know, money laundering, the Deutsche Bank in-house investigators who flagged certain suspicious activities. Things have changed in that sense. Just on Pelosi and Trump, though, can I say something that I know, Erica, you and Sarah might not be able to say, but let me just say, he's not mercurial. He's unwell and unstable, and this isn't about both sides. Yes, Nancy Pelosi said there should be an intervention, but most people who worked for Trump have come out and said that after leaving office, either on or off the record. He, on the other hand, put out a video saying Pelosi stammers through news conference, which still sits on his Twitter account last time I checked before I came on air. An outrageous edited video to make her look bad and crazy. And everything you played in that video just now was classic Trumpian projection. She's crazy. No, he is. She's changed over the years. No, he has, as we've all seen. And I think this is a real problem. And for Pelosi to say family and colleagues should intervene, I'm sorry, let's talk about this impeachment debate that the Democrats are now having internally, finally. The idea that the Speaker of the House is calling on Mike Pence, Ben Carson, and Melania Trump to save the Republic when House Democrats should actually be starting impeachment hearings is absurd on her part.
All right, we're going to leave it there for just a moment, but stay with us. They are all vying for the party's nomination. So why then are several 2020 Democrats now coming to the defense of their party's frontrunner, Joe Biden? We'll explain. Welcome back to this live special edition of The Lead, our 2020 lead now. We're less than a month away from the first Democratic debate, and candidates on this holiday weekend are in full campaign mode, focusing though less on each other and more on attacking President Trump. As CNN's Rebecca Buck reports, the president may be overseas, but he's still at the center of the 2020 race.
What a crowd!
This Memorial Day, the 2020 field is spread out across the country in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Bend, Indiana. President Trump keeping his focus on the race even during his official visit to Japan, taking a swipe at Democratic frontrunner Joe Biden in a tweet praising North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. The tweet drew a swift response from Democrats like Senator Elizabeth Warren. Foreign policy by tweet does not work. And Beto O'Rourke, who called on Trump to end these love affairs with dictators and strongmen. A Biden aide responding to CNN, calling the president's tweet unhinged and erratic, while Biden's rivals jumped in to defend him.
Kim Jong-un is a murderous dictator, and the Vice President Biden served this country honorably.
The former vice president was off the trail this weekend, but that isn't stopping another candidate from partaking in a favor Biden treat.
Speeding up the line there.
Senator Bernie Sanders cooling off with 3 ice cream socials in New Hampshire on Monday, turning up the heat on Trump during a Vermont rally this weekend.
We have a president who is a pathological liar.
In Iowa, Senator Amy Klobuchar also taking aim at the president on Saturday, recalling a moment with the late Senator John McCain at Trump's inauguration.
John McCain kept reciting to me names of dictators during that speech because he knew more than any of us what we were facing as a nation. He understood it.
John McCain's daughter Meghan weighing in today on Twitter, asking Klobuchar to leave her father's legacy and memory out of presidential politics. And we're here with Cory Booker in Iowa as he wraps up a 4-day swing through the Hawkeye State. This week, the candidates will head west for a Move On Forum on Friday in San Francisco. And of course, Erica, we're only 1 month away from the first Democratic presidential debate. Erica?
Clock is ticking. Rebecca Buck in Iowa today. Rebecca, thank you. We just heard a little bit there from South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg weighing in on the president's comments about Joe Biden. I want to play a little bit more, though, of what he had to say. Take a listen.
Kim Jong-un is a murderous dictator, and Vice President Biden served this country honorably. It's just one more example of the way that this president tries to draw attention to himself by saying things that shock the conscience to distract us from his deep unpopularity and the deep unpopularity of the Republican government in general.
Maybe what we just heard from Mayor Buttigieg, is that how Democratic candidates, you think, should handle any attacks from President Trump?
Definitely, and I think they have to stick together because Trump is going to try and single them all off and take them out one at a time whenever he thinks who's up and who's down in the polls. Right now, we know that Trump and his team are worried about Biden, so they, you see these absurd comments. And, I think Democrats recognize that there isn't a big pro-Kim Jong-un constituency in American politics, and therefore it's easy to defend Biden against such attacks. They're all going to be turning on Joe Biden fairly soon if they haven't already. The debate's, I think, a month away. Biden's the front runner. At some stage, they're going to have to train their fire on him, but they'll do it, I assume, in a more measured way than saying that the dictator of North Korea thinks he's low IQ. There's much to attack Joe Biden for. Legitimate stuff. This isn't it.
It's interesting you say they have to stick together because at least one Democrat sticking together, going after Vice President Biden. Take a listen to what Bill de Blasio had to say.
That crime bill was one of the foundations of mass incarceration in a very painful era in our nation's history. And I think, look, the Vice President and anyone else has to be accountable for every vote they take and what's on their record. And I think that was a huge mistake.
As Mehdi points out, at some point the gloves are going to have to come off for the candidates here because each one of them, of course, wants to win the nomination. Sarah, is there a sense, though, of when that moment is, especially as the clock is ticking towards this first debate?
Well, I think people are starting to sort of inch in that direction. Bill de Blasio is sort of in a lane of his own because I think he kind of needs to punch up in order for anyone to pay any attention to him. I mean, most stories you read about Bill de Blasio are about how even New Yorkers don't want Bill de Blasio to be president. So I think he's got a different situation, but you're going to see more candidates like that who are going to punch up. I think, there's a difference in saying, I'm going to side with Kim Jong-un on this than pointing out legitimate sort of policy differences. And I think in the Democratic Party, to see Joe Biden come out there and say, the crime bill didn't have anything to do with mass incarceration, that was one of those things where I did a double take and thought, is anyone else in the Democratic field paying attention to this? And I think that is going to come back around, and you're going to see legitimate policy differences, and that is what the primaries are going to be for. Those will probably turn nasty at some point, but I think they start on the policy front.
Well, and what Trump doesn't want to do, not that he has a strategy, but what he doesn't want to do is act in such a way that gives them a way to easily unify. I mean, 23 candidates, it's hard to unify them, but if you go after Biden, who's former vice president, on foreign soil in such a way, it will give them that way to do that. But eventually this is going to get a lot uglier.
Ron, go ahead.
I say if Biden wins the nomination in 2020, it would be 50 years after he was first elected to public office in Newcastle County, Delaware in 1970. That would be the longest span in American political history between first election and first nomination for your party, whether a Democrat, a Republican, or even a Whig. And de Blasio's comments are really indicative of the kind of problems that creates. I mean, the crime bill in 1994 occurred in a very different context. In New York City alone, there were over 1,000 murders, as I recall, that year. And every leading African-American mayor in the country wrote a letter supporting the bill as the Senate was considering it. But aspects of that bill, in hindsight, look very different, and they look very different to this Democratic Party. And I think the kind of the changing context is one of the reasons why the most prominent note in the polling about the early Democratic race is this unbelievable age gap, where Biden is just kind of in the middle of the pack among voters younger than 45. But older than 45, he's usually leading by 4 to 1 or more in both national and state polls. And ultimately, I mean, that seems like a divide that could last, given kind of the length of his career, and be one of the driving factors of this race.
It's also true that a lot of old people vote, so even
where 60% of the primary voters in 2016, whether 60% of the primary voters in 2016,
but whether it lasts, we're so far out from even Iowa, let alone the actual general election. And people keep making the point, but it is true, the only way he has to go is down. We haven't had the debates. He's notoriously gaffe prone, and his record, his record is bad on a lot of fronts, not just mass incarceration. Memorial Day weekend, the Iraq War, which caused so many problems for Hillary Clinton. He's only candidate running in the field who voted for the Iraq War. His relationship to big finance. There's so much to go through, and I think that's a real problem for Biden once you start going through that track record. I think Bill de Blasio had every right to point that out.
So you're all saying that we have a long way to go here? In all seriousness. Yes, we do. We're going to have to leave it there. Appreciate it, as always. Just ahead, he's one of the deadliest climbing fleet today as President Trump attacks Joe Biden and 2020 Democrats fire back. Is there any hope for a happy relationship between the two parties? The new CNN comedy special takes a humorous look at whether we'd be better off breaking up.
I understand it's sad breaking up the United States, but we're already broken up. This would just be acknowledging it. We're already tribal. We're broken into tribes already. It's over. Liberal, conservative, white, black, Latino, Asian, Wall Street, Main Street, the working poor, the forgotten middle class, feminists, soccer moms, Bernie bros, dot bots, mantis, mom jeans, muffin tops, unibrows, paleo, cardio, keto, intersectional trans vegans. We're more tribal than 18th century Afghanistan.
Joining me now is Colin Quinn, comedian and creator of Colin Quinn, Red State, Blue State. Welcome to the CNN family.
Thanks, Erica.
So this all started as an off-Broadway play in January. Now you've got the CNN special. Yes, it's important to laugh at things, but a lot of this is really serious for a lot of folks and depressing to a lot of people. So what made you think that the state of politics today in the U.S. was ripe for some funny?
Well, because funny is based on depressing, serious things. It's not based on things that are already funny, you know what I mean? So most comedy is based on something sad or bad compared to, you don't take a funny thing and just make it funnier. It's just the opposite.
It also gives you license sometimes to talk about things,
yes.
That people have a hard time discussing. But when you turn it into a joke, when you make fun of it, it makes it more accessible, more approachable. I'm wondering, in terms of the reaction that you've seen from the audience at your shows, did anything surprise you?
I'm surprised that people really do feel like this is an option now. I talk about this kind of stuff all the time in my act, but now people are actually agreeing that we need to find some way to break our country into different parts, because nobody's changing their opinion, and they shouldn't have to.
Wow, that's sort of dire, which makes me want more humor, as to your point. So looking ahead to 2020, do you see anybody, whether it's President Trump or any of the, 24 Democratic candidates, who you think could be a unifier?
Oh, definitely President Trump. No, I think, Joe Biden says he's going to be a unifier, but like I said, I don't know that there's anybody that exists on the planet that can unify this country. Only something outside would have to happen for it to be unified. There's no person that could do it.
Maybe it's not a person, but maybe in some ways you can start to at least unify the discussion with your show. Listen, we're excited to have you here. We're looking forward to the special tonight. Thanks for coming in today, Colin.
Thanks, Eric.
Just a reminder, you can watch Colin Quinn, Red State, Blue State, tonight at 9 p.m. only on CNN. On this Memorial Day, how one group of veterans is helping children cope with the loss of a military parent. It's a story you will not want to